The Palace of Versailles by Lorena Navarrete. The Palace of Versailles is one of the greatest achievements in French 17th century art. King Louis XIII's old hunting pavilion was transformed and extended by his son, Louis XIV, when he installed the court and government there in 1682. A succession of kings continued to embellish the palace until the French Revolution. Today, the palace contains 2,300 rooms spread over 63,000 miles. King Louis XIV coined the Sun King from 1638 to 1715, ruled for 72 years. It was Louis XIV who transformed Versailles with a host of artists, architects, and landscape designers into one of the greatest monuments in the French Baroque. Considered a tribute to Classicism, the architecture of Versailles was to articulate the immense power of the king. The symbolism of the Sun King is visible in the architecture of Versailles. Every painting and sculpture had one goal: to celebrate the king. Louis XIV's bedroom was built on the upper floor and located centrally along the east-west axis of the palace. It was the most important room and the location of the most important ceremonies to the king, which were to wake up and to go to sleep, surrounded by his royal court. The palace contained about 350 living units, varying in size from multiple room apartments to very small spaces. The size and location of the room that a person got depended on their rank and standing with the king. The crown prince, for example, got a sprawling apartment on the ground floor, while a servant may have nothing more than a space in an attic or behind a staircase. Given the grandiose symbolism of the ground plan and the interior decorations, the actual appearance of the outside of the Palace of Versailles, with its rows of iconic columns, is surprisingly modest. The simplicity of design and decoration is another demonstration of the French ability to combine the extremes of Baroque art with a more classical spirit. The gardens of Versailles, located to the west part of the palace, cover some 3 miles of land, much of which is landscaped in the classical French garden style. The Hall of Mirrors, the most famous room in the palace, was built to replace a large terrace which opened to the garden. The terrace originally stood between the king's apartments to the north and the queen's to the south, but was awkward and above all exposed to bad weather, and it was not long before the decision was made to demolish it. This massive room measures about 240 feet long, 34 feet wide, and has 40-foot ceilings. On one wall, 357 mirrors stretch from the floor to the ceiling. On the opposite wall, 17 large glass doors offer breathtaking views of Versailles' sprawling gardens. The mirrors were strategically placed in the room to reflect the scenery outside. The present chapel of the Palace of Versailles is the fifth in the history of the palace. As the focal point of King Louis XIV's fourth and last building campaign, lasting from 1699 to 1710, the fifth and final chapel of the Chateau of Versailles is an unreserved masterpiece. The court left Versailles in October of 1789 for Paris. It would never return. It was not until the ascension to the throne of Louis Philippe as the King of the French in 1830 that Versailles was really brought back to life. Like the members of his family, the new sovereign of the July monarchy was interested in history. By deciding in 1833 to create a museum dedicated to all the glories of the French, the monarch sought to reforge a bond among the French people, from the legitimate monarchists to the revolutionaries, and from the supporters of Napoleon to the liberals. Opening in 1837, the museum celebrated glorious events in the history of France from the Middle Ages to the start of the July monarchy.